For 3 long days, not a single person had stopped at his table. 3 long days, in a giant room packed with thousands of people, and the old man had sold nothing at all. What none of them knew, as they walked past him without a look, was that one of his handmade hats held a secret. It was a secret that would soon leave one of the greatest movie stars on earth completely frozen, unable to speak, with tears in his eyes. But that moment was still hours away. First, the old man had to survive one more day of being invisible. His name was Arthur Pendleton, and he was 74 years old. He sat in a folding metal chair behind a plain black table at the very back corner of the Las Vegas Western Hat Show. It was the biggest gathering of hat collectors and Western wear dealers in the whole country. All around him, the giant room roared with life. Glass cases shined with fancy brand-name hats worth tens of thousands of dollars. Famous dealers stood behind clean, bright booths, laughing with rich buyers. American flags hung from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with the constant sound of people talking and prices being argued over. And there, in the forgotten corner, sat Arthur. He wore a worn canvas jacket and a thick apron. The apron was stained from 40 years of hot steam, leather dye, and sweat. On his table sat 4 hats. They were not shiny, they were not famous. They were just 4 simple Western hats, made entirely by hand. Each one was steamed, shaped, and sewn over hundreds of patient hours in a tiny workshop behind his house, in a poor neighborhood on the east side of the city. Arthur had spent every dollar he had left to rent this table. It had cost him $900 for the 3 days. It was money he did not have. It was money he had borrowed against the only thing he owned, his workshop. He had come here believing that if he could just get his hats in front of the right people, someone would understand what he had made. Someone would see the magic in them. But for 3 days, no one had even slowed down. The young dealers at the booths next to him had noticed him, though. 2 of them were sharp young men in fitted black suits. They ran a booth selling very expensive, flashy cowboy hats. They had been whispering about him since the first morning. Arthur could hear them when the crowd got quiet. He heard their mean laughter. He heard one of them say, loud enough to carry, "Look at this guy. Handmade hats. No brand, no name. He is sitting back here like anyone is going to buy that homemade junk. This is a professional show, not a cheap street market." Arthur said nothing. He had learned over a long and hard life that getting angry changed nothing. He simply kept his eyes down. He took his soft brushing cloth and gently brushed the top of the hat closest to him. He brushed it the way a man might comfort a child that the world had pushed away. But inside, something was breaking. This was not just about pride. Arthur was out of time. He was out of money. He was out of choices. His wife, Martha, had passed away 2 years ago after being sick for a long time. Her sickness had drained every penny they had. The hospital bills had swallowed their life savings whole. Now, the bank was getting ready to take his house. With the house, they would take his workshop. It was the only place in the world where he still felt close to her. Because Martha had believed in his hats when no one else did. She had sat with him through every late night. She held the heavy leather while he sewed the sweatbands. She told him over and over, "Someday, Arthur, the whole world is going to see what these hats can do. They will see how special they are." She had not lived to see that day. And now, on the last afternoon of the last show he could ever afford to attend, it was beginning to look like that day would never come at all. Arthur looked down at the hat in his hands. It was the one he had poured the most love into. It was made from a rare piece of old, soft beaver felt that he had saved for decades. The leather band inside was made from an old saddle that had belonged to Martha's father in Texas. He had built that hat for her. He had never planned to sell it, but now, if he did not sell something today, he would lose everything. So he had placed it on the table with the others. Every hour that passed without a single buyer felt like losing Martha all over again. The young dealer's voice cut through his thoughts again. It was mean and cruel. "Hey, old-timer, you sell anything yet? No? 3 whole days. Maybe take the hint, huh? Some people just are not meant for this business." Arthur closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath. He would not cry here, not in front of them. And that was the exact moment when the crowd near the front of the room began to shift. A low whisper started to ripple through the giant hall. It grew louder and louder as a tall man in a denim shirt and dark jeans made his way slowly toward the forgotten back corner. The whisper grew into a giant wave of noise. Heads turned all across the enormous room. People pulled out their phones. Through the parting crowd walked a man that everyone in that building recognized right away. He was a tall man with iconic squinting eyes, silver hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. It was Clint Eastwood. Whispers exploded through the room. "That is Clint. Clint Eastwood is here. Oh my goodness, it is actually him." Dealers stood up straight. The two young men in black suits at the neighboring booth suddenly stood up very tall. They smoothed their jackets. Their eyes lit up with extreme hunger. If a Western legend like Clint Eastwood stopped at your booth, if he even touched one of your hats, the value of everything you owned would double overnight. Clint moved slowly through the show. He nodded politely at the people who called his name. Sometimes he paused to look at a hat in a shiny glass case. The two young dealers practically jumped in front of him as he got close to their section. "Mr. Eastwood, sir, we have some of the rarest hats in the entire country. Pure beaver fur, gold buckles. Come, come, you have to see these." But Clint barely looked at their gleaming, expensive hats. Something else had caught his attention. His eyes had drifted past the fancy booths. They drifted past the glass cases and the famous brands. His eyes went all the way to the forgotten corner at the very back of the hall. He looked at a plain black table. He looked at 4 simple handmade hats. And he looked at an old man in a stained leather apron sitting alone behind them with his head bowed, brushing a hat as if no one else in the world existed. Clint stopped walking. The young dealers kept talking, but he was no longer listening. He was looking at those 4 hats. A strange look had come over his face. It was a kind of quiet understanding. It was the look of a true artist who could spot real magic from across a crowded room. Without saying a word, Clint turned and began walking straight toward the back corner. The young dealers looked at each other in panic. They hurried after him. "Mr. Eastwood, wait. You do not want to go back there. That is just some guy with homemade stuff. It is amateur work. We have the real collector pieces right here." Clint did not slow down. He walked past all of it. He walked past the fortunes hiding in glass, until he reached the plain black table where Arthur sat. The old man had not even noticed him yet. He was still lost in his own sadness, still gently brushing the felt. "Excuse me," Clint said softly, his deep, famous voice rumbling. Arthur looked up. For a moment, he simply stared. He could not understand what he was seeing. Clint Eastwood was standing at his table. Clint Eastwood was looking at his hats. The old man's mouth opened, but no words came out. "May I?" Clint asked gently. He pointed toward the hats on the table. Arthur nodded slowly. His heart suddenly started pounding in his chest. "Of course. Please. They are made by hand. Each one. I built them myself." Clint ran his eyes across the 4 hats. But then, his eyes settled on one in particular. It was the one at the end. The one made from the rare, old beaver felt with the saddle leather band. Something about it seemed to pull at him. He reached out and picked it up with both hands. He lifted it carefully, the way someone might lift something holy. The 2 young dealers stood nearby. They were smirking and whispering to each other. "This is going to be embarrassing. He is going to try it on and realize it is junk. Watch." Clint held the hat for a moment. He felt its weight. He ran his fingers along the soft felt brim. He checked the tiny, perfect stitches on the inside band. Then, slowly, he raised it up and placed it onto his head. He pulled the brim down just a little, settling it perfectly. And then, everything stopped. The way the hat sat on his head was perfect. It looked like it belonged there. It framed his face in a way that modern, machine-made hats just could not do. But it was more than how it looked. It was how it felt. The hat had perfect balance. It was incredibly light but felt strong, carrying the true, rugged spirit of the Old West. It was the work of an absolute master. Clint froze. His hands went completely still at his sides. His famous eyes widened, and then slowly closed. For a long, quiet moment, he did not move at all. The 2 young dealers stopped smirking. The small crowd that had gathered around became completely silent. Arthur Pendleton watched, holding his breath. One of the greatest movie legends who had ever lived stood frozen under his handmade hat, completely overcome by something he could not yet put into words. When Clint finally opened his eyes, they were shining with tears. He looked down at Arthur. His deep voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. It was shaking with disbelief. "Where," Clint said slowly, "did you learn to shape felt like this? I have worn thousands of hats in my life. Thousands. On movie sets, on ranches, and I have never, not once, felt anything like this. Who are you?" Arthur opened his mouth, but for a moment the words would not come. This legend, this man he had watched on movie screens for 50 years, was standing at his table with tears in his eyes, asking about his hat. It was too much to believe. "My name is Arthur Pendleton," he finally managed to say. His voice was shaking. "I am a hatter. I have been building hats by hand for 40 years, sir. That hat you are wearing, the felt is very old, and the leather band inside, it comes from an old riding saddle that belonged to my wife's father in Texas." Clint reached up and touched the brim of the hat gently. "Your wife," he repeated softly. "Martha," Arthur said. Just saying her name made his throat feel tight. "She passed away 2 years ago. That saddle was broken many years ago," Arthur explained. "Her family was going to throw it away, but I asked them for it. I cleaned the leather for 11 years, sir. 11 years in my workshop, treating it, letting it soften, waiting until it was ready. And then I built that hat for her. It was going to be a gift, but she got sick before I finished it. She never got to wear it." The small crowd that had gathered around the table was now completely silent. Even the 2 young dealers had stopped smirking. They stood a few feet away, listening. Their faces were slowly changing. Clint was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice carried a deep respect that made the whole corner of the giant room feel like a church. "Arthur, I need you to understand something. I have worn hats made by the greatest makers in the world. I have held movie props worth more than most people's homes. And I am telling you, as a man who has spent his entire life loving the history of the West, that what you have made here is not just a hat. It is one of the finest pieces of clothing I have ever touched in my life. The balance, the shape, the way the brim catches the light. This is not just a trade. This is art. This is love, made into felt and leather." Arthur's eyes filled with tears. He had waited 40 years to hear someone say those words. And the only person who had ever truly believed it, the person he had built this very hat for, was no longer alive to hear it. "Mr. Eastwood," Arthur whispered, "you do not know what it means to hear you say that. For 3 days I have sat here, and no one stopped. Not one person. They walked past me like I was invisible. Those young men over there," he looked toward the dealers, "they called my life's work homemade junk. And maybe I had started to believe them. Maybe I had started to think that Martha was wrong, that these hats were worth nothing, that I had wasted my whole life on a silly dream." "No," Clint said firmly. He shook his head. "Listen to me. The people who walked past you were not blind because your work is invisible. They were blind because they have forgotten how to see. They look for a famous name on a shiny tag. They look for a high price. They have forgotten that the greatest things in history were made by hand, by unknown men in small workshops, out of nothing but skill, patience, and love. You did not waste your life, Arthur. The world just was not paying attention. Until today." Then Clint turned around. His eyes found the 2 young dealers standing nearby. His face, which had been so warm and gentle a moment ago, turned cold and serious. "You two," Clint said quietly. "I heard what you said when I first walked in. You told me not to come back here. You called this man's work amateur. You laughed at him for 3 days while he sat here, and you never once picked up one of his hats to find out if you were right." The young men shifted from foot to foot. They looked very uncomfortable. One of them, the taller one named Trent, tried to smile. "Mr. Eastwood, we did not mean any harm. We just, you know how these shows are. There are a lot of people who do not know what they are doing. We just wanted to save you time." Clint took the beautiful hat off his head. He held it out toward Trent. "Take it," Clint said. The young man blinked. "What?" "Take it in your hands," Clint repeated. His voice was calm but very firm. "Feel the felt. Look at the stitching on the band. You are a dealer of fine Western wear, yes? You claim to know high quality. So hold this hat right now in front of all these people, and then tell me again that it is homemade junk. Go on." Trent's face had gone totally pale. He reached out with shaking hands and took the hat. The moment his fingers brushed the vintage felt, his whole expression crashed. He felt exactly what Clint had felt. He saw the tiny, perfect, hand-sewn stitches. He felt the truth. He realized, in front of the whole crowded room, just how terribly wrong he had been. Trent slowly lowered the hat. His hands were still shaking. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, and his voice came out barely above a whisper. I don't understand. This is the finest Western hat I have ever held in my life, and I have handled the most expensive brand-name hats in the country. This shouldn't be possible. Not from a simple table in the back corner." He turned to Arthur. For the first time all weekend, there was no pride or meanness in his face. There was only deep shame. "Sir, I owe you an apology. A real one. I sat over there for 3 days and I laughed at you. I called your work junk. I told people you did not belong here. And I never once took the time to find out that you might be the most talented person in this entire building. I am so sorry." Arthur looked at the young man for a long time. He could have said something mean back to him. He could have thrown the cruel words back in his face. But instead, the old hatter simply nodded his head gently. "You are young," Arthur said softly, "and young people make mistakes. What matters is if you learn from them. Today, I think you have learned something, and that is enough for me." Trent swallowed hard. He felt very small. He set the hat down on the table with a gentleness that looked like deep respect. While this happened, Clint had picked up the second of Arthur's hats. Then he picked up the third, then the fourth. He looked closely at the shape and the stitching of each one. His face looked more and more amazed with every hat he touched. Finally, he set the last one down. He turned to face Arthur with a serious look that made the old man's heart race. "Arthur, I have a question for you, and I want you to answer me honestly. These 4 hats, how much money were you asking for them?" Arthur looked down at the floor. He felt embarrassed. "I had priced them at $2,000 each, sir, but after 3 days with no buyers, I was ready to take $500. I would have taken anything. Honestly, I need the money very badly. The bank, they are going to take my house next month. And my workshop is right behind the house. If I lose the house, I lose the only place where I can still work. I lose everything." Those sad words hung heavy in the air. Clint was silent for a moment. Something in his face got very hard and determined. 2,000 thousands, Clint repeated quietly. He shook his head slowly. "Arthur, do you have any idea what this special beaver felt hat is actually worth? A piece of clothing of this amazing quality, made from materials saved for over a decade, with a shape like this, if it had a famous brand name on the inside, it would sell at a fancy auction for $50,000, maybe more. And you were going to let it go for $500 just because the world refused to see what was sitting right in front of them." A loud gasp rippled through the growing crowd. People had been filming the whole thing on their cell phones. Now, the small corner was packed with dozens and dozens of people, all trying to listen. Clint reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "But I am not going to let that happen. Not today." He looked right into Arthur's eyes. "First, this special hat, the one you made for Martha. I want to buy it, and I do not want to pay you $2,000 for it, or $500. That would be an insult to the art you have created. I am going to pay you what it is truly worth." Arthur's eyes went wide as saucers. "Mr. Eastwood, no, I could not possibly take—" "I have not finished," Clint said gently, raising one hand. "I am going to pay you $50,000 for this one hat. And I want to buy the other 3 as well, at the exact same price, because I am going to make sure they end up on the heads of people who will understand them. People who will wear them in movies and on ranches for the whole world to see. Do the math, Arthur. That is $200,000 today." The old man's legs went weak. He had to grab the edge of his black table to keep from falling over. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The crowd exploded in shocked whispers. Trent and the other young dealers stared with their mouths hanging wide open. "But Arthur," Clint continued. Now his famous eyes were shining again. "The money is not even the most important part. Because I am telling you, A talent like yours cannot stay hidden in a back corner anymore. The world needs to know your name, and I am going to make sure that it does." He lifted his phone and began to push the buttons. Arthur, still shaking all over, still barely able to take a breath, watched in confusion as Clint pressed the phone to his ear and waited. "Who?" Arthur whispered. "Who are you calling?" Clint gave him a small, knowing smile. "Someone who is going to change your life forever." "Just wait, my friend, just wait." And then the person on the other end answered. What Clint said next made the entire noisy crowd fall completely silent. "Hello, Harrison," Clint said into the phone. His voice was warm but very urgent. "It is Clint. Yes, I know. It has been a long time. Listen, I need you to do a huge favor for me, and I need you to trust me completely. I am standing at the Las Vegas Western Hat Show right now, and I have just found the greatest hatter that no one in the world has ever heard of. I am not joking. His hats are amazing. I want you to fly out here and meet him. I want your big clothing company to make a deal with this man, and I want it to be the best deal of his entire life." The crowd around the table held its breath. Arthur simply stared. He could not understand that this was really happening to him. Clint listened to his phone for a moment, then smiled broadly. "Yes, tomorrow I will make sure he is ready. His name is Arthur Pendleton. Write that name down, Harrison, because in 1 year, everyone in the Western wear world is going to know it." He paused, then let out a soft laugh. "Trust me, I have never been more sure of anything in my whole life. Thank you, my friend. I will see you tomorrow." He hung up the phone and turned back to Arthur, who looked like he was about to faint. "That," Clint said, "was Harrison. He is an old friend of mine. He runs one of the biggest and most respected Western clothing companies in the world. He is going to fly here tomorrow just to meet you, and if I know your work, and I do, he is going to offer you a real business partnership. They will give you a proper, beautiful workshop. They will give you the finest leather and felt in the world. They will give you helpers to teach. And they will put your name, Pendleton, on the inside of every hat you make. The world is going to know what Martha always knew." At the sound of his wife's name, Arthur finally broke. The tears he had been holding back for 3 days, for 2 years, for his whole life, came pouring down his wrinkled face. He covered his mouth with his shaking, rough hands. His shoulders shook as he cried. The crowd around him fell totally silent. Many people in the crowd started wiping their own eyes. "Mr. Eastwood," Arthur cried softly, "I do not know how to thank you. This morning, I woke up believing my life's work was trash. I woke up believing I had failed her. I thought I had spent 40 years chasing a dream that meant nothing at all. And now, you have given me back my whole life in just one afternoon. You have made her right. After all these long years, you made Martha right." Clint stepped forward. He pulled the old man into a gentle hug, holding him as he cried. "No, Arthur," Clint said softly. "I did not give you anything. Everything you have today, you earned with 40 years of hard work with your own 2 hands. All I did was see it. All I did was stop and look when everyone else just walked right past." And that was the lesson in all of this. Clint turned to face the giant crowd. He still held onto Arthur's shoulder. He raised his deep voice so that everyone in the big room could hear him. "How many brilliant people have we walked past in our lives?" Clint asked the room. "How many amazing people have we ignored because they did not wear fancy clothes, because they did not have a famous name, because they did not have the biggest booth at the front of the room? This man sat right here for 3 whole days. Thousands of you walked right by him, and every single one of you missed a treasure. You missed it because you were too busy looking for a shiny, famous label to notice real genius sitting right in front of your faces." He looked around at the people in the crowd. Many of them looked down at the floor because they knew he was right. "The world is full of Arthur Pendletons," Clint continued. "People with amazing gifts, sitting in dark, forgotten corners. People being told they do not matter. And most of those people will never get the lucky moment that Arthur got today. Most of them will give up. They will believe the lie that they are worthless. But the truth is, the world simply refused to open its eyes and look at them. So, I am asking all of you, the next time you walk past someone in a back corner, someone the world has ignored, stop. Look. Really look. because you never know when you might be walking past the greatest artist of your generation. The crowd broke into giant applause. It was loud and full of heart. Several people pushed forward to shake Arthur's hand. They wanted to congratulate him. They wanted to buy his hats, now that they finally understood what he had made. In just 1 hour, the invisible old man in the back corner had become the most important person in the entire giant building. But Clint was not finished. There was still one more thing he needed to do. It was one final thing that no one could have guessed. He picked up the special hat, the one made of rare felt and the old saddle leather, the one made for Martha. He held it out toward the old hatter with both hands. "Arthur," Clint said gently, "before I take this hat home, there is something I need you to do first, and I think it is the real reason all of this happened today." Clint looked him in the eyes. "You told me that Martha never got to see this hat finished. She got sick before it was done. It was meant to be a gift just for her, and she left this world before you could give it to her." Arthur nodded his head. Fresh tears filled his tired eyes. "That is true, sir. I finished sewing it 6 months after she passed away. I have never let anyone wear it. It felt wrong. It felt like it belonged to her, and only her." "Then finish the gift right now," Clint said softly. "Shape the brim for her. Right here, in front of all these people. Use your hands to give it its final, perfect shape. Let her finally see the beautiful thing you built out of her father's old saddle. I believe she is watching us, Arthur. And I think this is the moment she has been waiting for. The moment you both have been waiting for." The old man's hands shook as he took the hat back. For a long moment, he simply held it. He looked down at the soft, old felt. He remembered all the late nights. He remembered all the years of patient waiting. He remembered all the deep love that had gone into every tiny stitch and every curve of the brim. He remembered Martha sitting right beside him. She would hold the heavy leather while he pushed the needle through. She told him over and over that the whole world would one day see how beautiful his hats were. And now, finally, that day was here. Arthur pulled his chair close and sat down. He pulled a small bottle of warm water and a shaping cloth from his bag. He set the hat on his knee. He gently misted the edge of the felt. Then, he placed his rough, tired fingers on the brim. In that quiet corner of the giant room, surrounded by a totally silent crowd, the old hatter closed his eyes and began to shape the hat. The movements of his hands were a beautiful dance. He pinched and rolled the felt. He smoothed the crown. His fingers were not fast, but they were perfect. Every single movement carried the heavy weight of a whole lifetime of love and sadness. He shaped the hat with a gentle care that made the busy noise of the big room fade away into absolute nothing. And as he worked, something amazing happened. The huge crowd, dozens and dozens of people, stood completely still like statues. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. Some people pressed their hands over their mouths. Other people let tears fall right down their faces. Even the 2 young dealers who had been so mean to him stood with their heads looking down. They were crying too, because they were not just watching a man shape a hat. They were watching a man write a love letter to his dead wife, using his hands and a piece of old felt. They were watching him in the exact moment he finally understood that his life's work had been important all along. Clint Eastwood stood off to the side. His own rough face was wet with tears. He had one hand pressed flat over his heart. When Arthur finally finished smoothing the very last curve of the brim, he opened his eyes. For a moment, he looked up toward the high ceiling, past the bright lights and the flags, as if he could see something that the rest of them could not see. "Martha," he whispered. He spoke so quietly that only the people standing closest to him could hear it. "You were right. You were right all along. The whole world saw it, just like you said they would." The crowd exploded, but it was not normal clapping. It was something much deeper. People were clapping through their tears. Many of them stepped forward just to lightly touch the old man's shoulder. They wanted to be near him. They wanted to be part of a moment they knew they would never, ever forget for the rest of their lives. Clint kneeled down on the floor in front of Arthur. He took both of the old man's shaking hands into his own big hands. "That," Clint said, his voice thick and heavy with emotion, "was the most beautiful thing I have seen in my entire life, in movies or anywhere else. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for letting me be here to see it." Arthur smiled through his tears. For the first time in 2 very long, very sad years, it was a huge smile of pure, true happiness. "No, Mr. Eastwood, thank you. You did not just buy my hats today. You gave me back my reason to wake up in the morning. And you let Martha finally see her gift. There is no gift in the whole world greater than that." Clint squeezed the old man's hands tightly. Then he stood up. He turned to the crowd one last time. But the story of Arthur Pendleton did not end in that big room in Las Vegas. It was only just beginning. Within 3 days, a video that a young boy named Leo had filmed on his cell phone went on the internet. The video showed Clint Eastwood closing his eyes and crying over a simple handmade hat. In just a few days, that video was watched more than 14 million times. People who had never even worn a cowboy hat in their lives were suddenly typing the same 3 words into their computers: Arthur Pendleton hats. Arthur himself knew nothing about this at first. He did not own a smartphone. He only had a tiny old flip phone that Martha had bought him many years ago. It usually rang maybe once a week. So when the little phone started ringing at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then again at 7:15, and then again and again until the battery died right before lunch, Arthur just sat in his workshop. He stared at the phone. He was very confused and a little bit scared. It was his neighbor, a nice woman named Clara, who ran the bakery 2 doors down the street, who finally knocked on his door to tell him. She was holding her own shiny phone, and her hands were shaking. "Mr. Pendleton," Clara said, out of breath, "you have to see this video. Please, you need to sit down first." Arthur did not understand the internet. He did not know what going viral meant, but he understood numbers. When Clara showed him the screen, he understood the giant number at the bottom: 14 million. And below the video, there were tens of thousands of messages. They were written by people from countries he had never visited and could not even spell. "Who teaches people to work with their hands like this anymore?" one person wrote. "This is what a lifetime of true love looks like," wrote another. "I drove past his little shop for 10 years and never knew a master artist was hiding inside," someone else typed. Arthur read the messages very slowly. His lips moved as he read the words. He pressed one hand flat against his chest, like he was trying to hold his heart inside his body. And then, very quietly, he began to cry. It was not the sad crying of a lonely man. It was the crying of a man who had spent 40 years thinking he was totally invisible, only to suddenly wake up and find out the whole world was looking right at him. "Martha," he whispered into the empty, dusty room. They saw it. After everything, they finally saw it. That afternoon, his little flip phone was plugged into the wall. It came back to life. Among the hundreds of missed calls was one phone number that Clara recognized. It was a manager from a giant movie studio. They bought clothes and hats for the biggest movie stars in the world. The message they left on the phone was simple and clear. 3 of the most famous actors in Hollywood had already asked to be put on a waiting list to buy an Arthur Pendleton hat. They did not ask for a discount. They did not ask for a favor. They wanted to be on a waiting list, and they had already paid all the money up front. But the moment that totally broke Arthur's heart in the best way came 1 week later. The mailman brought a plain white envelope to the workshop. It had no return address on it. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter. There was also a check, and there was a photograph. The letter was from Clint. "Arthur," the letter read, "I have worn hats made by the finest hands on this earth. I have worn movie costumes worth a fortune. But I have never, in all my years, worn a hat that was built out of sadness and love at the exact same time. When I put on your hat, I did not just feel felt and leather. I felt Martha's love. I felt 11 years of waiting. I felt a brave man who refused to let the mean world tell him his work was junk. Please, my friend, do not ever stop building hats. The world needs to be reminded that things made slowly, by hand, with deep love, are the only things that truly last forever." Arthur put the letter down on his old wooden workbench. He set it right next to a small, unfinished hat he had been working on when this whole crazy dream began. His hands were shaking too badly to hold the paper anymore. He looked down at the photograph. It was a picture of Clint, standing outside on a beautiful movie set. The bright sun was shining down. Clint was wearing the special hat with the old saddle leather band. He had a proud, slight smile on his face, and inside the brim of the hat, clearly showing in the photo, was the tiny little letter that Arthur stamped into the leather of every hat he ever made. It was an M for Martha. For a very long time, the old hatter sat totally alone in his quiet workshop. He was surrounded by scraps of leather, warm steam, and the smell of old felt. He did not move a muscle. Then, slowly, he picked up his shaping tool. He wiped his wet eyes with the back of his dirty sleeve. And he went back to work, because working with his hands was the only way he knew how to say thank you to God. Outside, the warm afternoon sun came shining through the dusty window. The light fell across the 4 empty hooks on the wall where the 4 hats used to hang. 6 months passed. The small workshop was no longer small. Arthur had not moved to a new building. He politely said no to every offer to move to a richer, fancier part of the city. "Martha and I built our whole life on this street," he told a young news reporter who came to talk to him. "I will not leave this street now, just because the world has finally decided to notice me." But the workshop itself looked very different. The old, broken wooden sign out front had been painted by Clara and the children from the neighborhood. It now said, "Pendleton Hats," in bright, beautiful gold letters. And inside the shop, along the big back wall, hung a row of brand new hats. They were in different stages of being finished, but every single one of them had a small M stamped inside. Arthur was 75 years old now. For the first time in his entire life, there was a waiting list for the work of his hands. People were not waiting for cheap hats. They were not looking for a quick bargain. They were waiting for time. They were waiting for the slow, patient, unhurried time of a master artist who refused to work any faster than love would allow. But Arthur had made a big choice that surprised everyone. It even surprised the rich business managers who kept calling him on the phone. Arthur decided he would only build 12 hats every year, no more than 12, and out of those 12 hats, 4 of them would never be sold for money at all. Instead, 4 times a year, Arthur opened the doors of his workshop on a sunny Saturday morning. He opened it to any child in the poor neighborhood who wanted to come in and learn. He invited children whose parents did not have money. He invited children who, just like a young boy named Arthur many years ago, had art inside their hearts but no way to let it out. He taught the children how to feel the felt. He taught them how to listen to the leather. He taught them how to shape the brim slowly with their hands, using only patience and love. "A hat is not just made of animal fur and thread," he would tell the wide-eyed children. He would hold up a raw piece of felt so they could see the fibers catching the light. "A hat is made of every single hour you are willing to give it. Cheap things in this world are made very fast, but the things that last forever, the things that make a grown man cry, those things are made slowly. They are made by someone who is not in a hurry to be famous." One Saturday in the warm spring, a big black car parked on the street outside the little workshop. The children did not notice it at first, but Arthur did. Clint Eastwood stepped out of the car. He was wearing his brown boots. But he did not come acting like a famous movie star. He came acting like a student. Clint walked in and sat right down on the dusty wooden floor with the children. He crossed his long legs, and he asked Arthur to teach him. He wanted Arthur to really teach him how to sew the inside band. He wanted to learn the hidden work that no movie audience ever sees. The secret work that decides if a hat is truly good or not. "You have acted in front of millions of people," Arthur said quietly. He was smiling, still half in disbelief. "What could an old man like me possibly teach you?" Clint smiled back. For a moment, he did not look like a Hollywood legend. He just looked like a man who loved a good hat. "You taught me the most important lesson in the world already," Clint said. "You reminded me that the world is completely full of master artists that nobody has bothered to look at. My whole life, people bought my movie tickets because of my famous name. That day in Las Vegas, I picked up your hat because of what it truly was. And I promised myself that I would spend the rest of my life picking things up because of how good they are, not because of who is watching me do it." The 2 old men sat together on the dusty floor of the workshop for the rest of that beautiful afternoon. They were surrounded by laughing children, pieces of leather, and the warm golden light shining through the window. And they built things together. That evening, after Clint and all the children had gone home, Arthur sat all alone once again. It was the same way he had sat alone for so many years before, But it was a very different kind of alone now. The empty hooks on the wall did not feel like a failure anymore. They felt like space. They felt like room to grow. Room for the next beautiful hat. Room for the next smiling child. Room for the next quiet, happy hour of work. He reached out and picked up the small photograph of Martha that he always kept on his workbench. It was the picture that had been sitting there through all the dark, invisible years. It had been there through all the empty trade shows and the quiet tables and the hats that nobody wanted to buy. "You always told me," he whispered to her picture. "You told me that the right person would see it one day. You told me that I just had to keep building until they finally did." He set the photograph down very gently. He looked at the unfinished hat sitting in front of him. It was made of thick, beautiful felt, of course. Always the best felt. And he picked up his little metal stamping tool. He began once more to press a tiny letter into the leather band. An M for Martha. For every hat. For every single hour he had been willing to give. Outside the window, on a street where people used to walk right past him without even looking. The neighborhood children were already asking their mothers and fathers when they could come back to the shop to learn more. And the old man, who was no longer invisible, turned on his small lamp. He worked late into the quiet night. He worked slowly. He worked patiently. He worked with deep love, because he finally knew that was the only way anything worth keeping had ever been made.